We are ready to go.
All right, very
Just,
good.
will one of you introduce me? I was muted when I meant to ask that.
Yeah, we'll get to that momentarily. I just have to open the meeting and then we'll.
Understood. Okay, rock and roll.
All right, so we're all set here. So welcoming everybody to the October 20th, 2022 meeting of the CB6 Public Safety Committee. I'm Matt Roberts, chair of the committee, and this meeting is called to order at 6:33 p.m. Also joined tonight by CB6 Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. Committee members, as you know, New York State law now requires members to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Your camera is not on and your name is not properly displayed, you cannot count towards the quorum. Again, this is only for members of the committee. Does not apply to other board members and members of the public in this setting. Members of the public, you can raise questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. And then if there's time following the committee's discussion, we'll field questions from the public. We still need a volunteer to take the meeting summary for tonight. It should be very quick because the presentation will be 99% of the meeting. So if we have a volunteer, please raise your hand through Zoom. And then we have a doodle sign-up sheet, which most of the committee members are familiar with. You can sign up for future months. That's put in the chat right now. But I still need a volunteer for tonight.
I see John has raised his hand.
All right, thanks, John. Yeah, I know you just did it last month, but this should be a 5-minute job. But we do need all members of the committee who are able to do so to take turns here. So if you haven't signed up or taken minutes recently, and keep in mind, I will announce it later, but we're probably not going to meet in November or December. So anyway, brings us to the attendance. I don't want to take any further time. Brendan will conduct the roll.
Yes. Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. John Derrico.
Present.
Stu Desser.
Brandon, I
I
think
didn't
you're
realize
muted.
I had. Okay, Stu Desser. Okay, I'm not hearing Stu, but I do see that he is present.
Yeah, he was also muted, but okay.
Yeah, I have noted that he is present. Eric Goldberg.
Present.
Sadie Howard.
Present.
Steve O.
Present.
Matt Roberts.
Present.
Seema Shah. I do not see Seema, so I will mark her as absent. And Lou Sapersky.
Yo.
We have a quorum.
Thanks, Brandon. So that brings us to the agenda. Just distributed ahead of time, appears on the screen before you. If there's no objection, committee members, we will adopt the agenda as stated. So if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing none, the agenda is for adopted for this evening. Meeting summary from the September 15th meeting was distributed ahead of time. There's no objection. We will adopt the meeting summary as drafted. If you object to adopting the meeting summary, meaning if you have any corrections or changes, you may raise your hand for Zoom. Seeing none, the minutes or the meeting summary is now adopted and will appear on the CB6 website in the very near future. Ground rules here, pretty familiar. No one is speaking until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question, a committee business, or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. Chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties or to state in writing information like an email address that was already on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you. You can unmute yourself. We had a few issues last month, so please try to adhere to that. And one last reminder that committee members are required, state open meetings law, to have their Zoom cameras on, first and last names displayed at all times until the meeting is adjourned. Must step away briefly. Please leave your camera on. So that brings us to the committee business, and the main event here is our bystander intervention training with the New York City Commission on Human Rights. And I know Jonah is with us. We kind of walked through this months ago, but I'm really glad that we're able to present this to the community. I think it's some really good, practical, and useful information that we can all use. So looking forward to that. Well, yeah, let's get it started. Bring in Jonah from the City Commission on Human Rights. Take it away, Jonah. Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, everyone on CB6 for bringing me in. Really glad to be here with you all this evening. Again, my name is Jonah Boyarin. I work for the New York City Commission on Human Rights. We're a city agency. We're public servants here to serve you. In this case, we want to educate you about how to look out for each other as everyday New Yorkers. My role is that I work in the Community Relations Bureau. We do education about the human rights law and also about how to get along as everyday New Yorkers. I'm an associate human rights specialist and the Jewish communities liaison for the agency. So I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint over here. Just give me a moment. Okay, folks, if there's any issue, if you're having any trouble seeing or hearing, please put in the chat or in the Q&A to let us know. As we go through the presentation, if any questions come up, please use the Q&A function to put them through. I might not see them right away, but we will take times through the presentation to look at them. I love having participation. I love having questions. This is something we're going to be all learning from each other. There's no one right way to do bystander intervention. So we need to share our experiences and our ideas. Similarly, I'm going to be using the chat function at some times just to check in to make sure to see, are you with me, or do you have any questions before we move on? Just because we're not all in the same room together. I wish we could be. That's just not how life is working right now this evening. So I'm going to be asking you explicitly at times to let me know if you have any questions before we move on. So first things first, got to start with a big note of gratitude to the Center of Anti-Violence Education of New York, CAENY. They're based in Brooklyn. For over 4 decades, they've been doing anti-violence community-based education. Their model is saying, you know, we all can be empowered to protect ourselves and protect one another and make our city safer for one another and more accepting for one another. So this training and a lot of the ideas comes from a partnership between our agency, the Commission on Human Rights, and CAENY. Commission on Human Rights has a twofold mission. One is to enforce the city's human rights law, which is one of the oldest and broadest anti-discrimination laws in the country, and also to promote positive intergroup relations across the city. Again, I'm in the Community Relations Bureau, so I'm working on the second part of that mission. Just some community norms so that we have a good experience together this evening. First of all, I ask you to come in with an open mind. Try it out. You don't have to agree with everything, and you might come out with your own ideas or disagreements or things that you do like. Just try on the ideas and the framework for the evening and see where that takes you. Second thing is accepting a lack of closure, because this is a big topic, right? This is a really complex area. People looking out for one another when something goes down. That means we're not going to address every kind of situation today. For instance, we're not going to address what happens, God forbid, if someone comes in with a weapon, an armed weapon, or attack. We're also focusing more on street level interactions. So that could be on public transportation, on the street, in public businesses, that kind of thing, and less in interpersonal relationships, right? So that's an important area too, but we don't have time for everything today. We're only going to do some things today. The third norm, just, speak from your own experience, right? Rather than telling someone else, oh, this is how it must be for you, or this is how it must be for everyone. Just say, yeah, this is how it's been for me. And then we can learn from each other that way. And the last is stories stay, lessons leave. So if someone shares a personal anecdote, and I'm with the exception of me because I'm presenting and I will share personal anecdotes and you can share those publicly. Those are public stories that I share. But if anyone else besides me shares a personal anecdote, that's something that we want to keep as specific to the space and not like share the identifying characteristics of who shared it or exactly what happened to them outside of it. But we do want to learn from those stories and take those lessons, both in how we behave in the world and how we talk to other people about this area. Okay, so here is a rough flow for today. We talked a little bit about what the Center for Anti-Violence Education is, what the New York City Commission on Human Rights is. We did some agreements, and we're doing agenda right now. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the New York City human rights law, because I want everyone to walk away with a sense of what your rights are as a New Yorker in the workplace, on the street, and other kinds of interactions, your legal civil rights. And then we're going to get into the area of bystander intervention. So we're going to do a little bit of grounding, do some shared analysis to say, what's the framework that we think about? You know, where does violence come from? Where does discriminatory harassment come from in our society? And we're going to talk about some things that hold us back from intervening. And then we're going to get to develop some concrete tools. What are a menu of options, right? This is not a one size fit all. It's not one thing is always better than the next. This is a menu of options that we're going to look at to empower everyone in this training to be stronger when these situations, if or when these situations come up. And then we're going to get to take a look at applying those to some scenarios, some hypothetical scenarios that are based on real life situations, and discuss those together. Again, with the spirit of, I want to know what we can teach each other about it, because this is not one size fits all. It's about a menu of options, and they differ in every situation and context. Our goals for today are to learn how to be an upstander using before, during, and after de-escalation strategies, understand oppression and power, how those foster discriminatory harassment, identifying our own position. When we walk into a situation or a situation comes up in front of us, what are we bringing into the room? What prevents us from intervening and what empowers us to intervene? And finally, we're going to go over issues responding to anti-Semitic, anti-Asian, anti-Black, and other bias incidents. Okay, the Commission on Human Rights. Again, we're a city agency. We enforce the city's human rights law, one of the oldest and broadest in the country. I'm a member of the Community Relations Bureau. Many of my colleagues are in the Law Enforcement Bureau, attorneys and non-attorneys who take cases when someone's been discriminated against in a variety of settings in New York City, and can prosecute them using civil law for the benefit of the victim. New York City human rights law applies to a variety of settings. So it could be your job, could be a public accommodation, which means anywhere that serves the public, a movie theater, a taxi, a social security agency, a grocery store, etc. Housing, discriminatory harassment, which is street-based, illegal harassment based on someone's identity that has a threat of violence, bias-based profiling by law enforcement, and a catch-all retaliation protection. If someone brings a case, they also have protection against retaliation from an employer, landlord, etc. And these apply to a wide variety of categories: someone's race, someone's nation of origin, sexuality, gender identity, religion, etc., etc. Okay, so without further ado, let's get ourselves set up to start thinking about some important and serious and sometimes difficult material. So if you're sitting down, please just find a nice, easy posture in your seat. So you can feel the seat of the chair underneath you. If your feet are touching the ground, have them relax against the ground, feel the ground supporting them. Find a nice, easy, alert posture. So that means neither bent over and defeated, nor puffed up and macho, but that nice, easy place in between where you're paying attention, you're alert, you're paying attention, and calm. If you're sitting down, you can place your hands on your thighs. And we're going to do an grounding exercise using breathing. So everyone exhale and inhale on my count. 1, 2, 3. Hold your breath. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold your breath. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold your breath. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold your breath. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold your breath. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold your breath. Take 2 or 3 more deep breaths on your own rhythm. If your eyes are closed, you can open them up. You can return to normal breathing. You can tap your feet on the ground a little. Re-enter the group. I just want to say, if anything comes up during this training that's upsetting for you, because we're talking about hard situations where someone's, getting attacked just because of their race or who they are and their identity in a different way. Take care of yourself. So if you need a little while to step away, you need to turn your camera off, you need to take a break in some way or another, take care of yourself. That is not outside of the practice of bystander intervention. It is part of it, because one of the key parts of bystander intervention is starting with being grounded, knowing your strengths, understanding your reactions to a situation that's happening, and making a conscious choice about how you can best respond. So let's do some shared framework again with, try this on for the course of our training. Maybe it's very familiar to you. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. Try it on for the course of the training and see where it takes you. So we talk about oppression. It's a word that gets bandied about a lot. It's a pattern or system of inequality that gives one group favor over the other at the expense of the other. Okay, and it can have 4 different areas that we're going to look at. So ideological, that's in the realm of belief, ideas that people have that are negative about a group of people. It could be anti-Asian bias, anti-Semitism, racism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, etc. So negative stereotypes, ideas, viewing a group as a threat, viewing them as less human. All those are ideological forms of oppression. Then we see the institutional level. So that's things, say, a bank. In the mid-20th century, the federal government and banks systematically denied mortgages to Black people, Black prospective homeowners in the country. That was official policy. So that was an institutional form of oppression. And during that time, they also denied mortgages to a lot of Jews and other people. And there's other forms of predatory lending that we see continuing to today that target working class communities of color. Hospitals, drug testing Black and brown moms at a higher rate than white mothers. So forms of institutional practices, oppression. It can also be interpersonal. Something can pop off just on the street between 2 people, neighbors, people on the subway. Or it could be in an ongoing relationship, a boss and a worker, or student and teacher. And finally, there's internalized inner feelings. So when people face oppression, they get these negative stories about them, and they get mistreated in certain ways. So I know, for me as a Jewish person, I've heard so many negative jokes and stereotypes, and there's been so much violence in recent history against Jewish people, including some violence today, that sometimes I have feelings of, oh, maybe there's something bad about me in this way. So that's a way that internalized oppression can affect people, for example. So continuing on that note, thinking through, how does oppression play out along these different lines? So we have, when we think about anti-Semitism as an example, There's ideology about Jews that says beliefs, ideas, the stereotypes about Jews saying, oh, Jews are so greedy, controlling, or they control the banks, or they control conspiracy theories, they control the economy, they control the government, they control Hollywood, or they're bad, they're evil, they're unhealthy. Those are all negative ideas about Jewish people. And then what we might see is overt forms of discrimination. So those can range from someone being beat up on the street just because they look Jewish, to someone getting differential treatment in a New York City hospital. We've gotten a lot of reports of that during COVID because they're Jewish, to, and this isn't a very far extreme, but it's also just a fact that in the last century, there was mass genocide against Jewish people, right? So those are ways that it impacts Jewish people. And again, there's these underlying false ideas about Jewish people secretly being in charge of everything, running society for their own nefarious purposes, or that Jews are not like us. They're not fully human because they're not in this country white enough, or they're not Christian enough, they're damned to hell, whatever it might be. And then Jews get blamed for society's problems. So another example, anti-Asian bias, right? So we might see the overt expression of anti-Asian bias, just people's attitudes towards the AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islanders in this country and in New York, having suspicion, not trusting Asian Americans, thinking that they have COVID or spreading COVID, to vandalizing Asian American sites like Buddhist temples, or actually, we've heard all too many cases of people being attacked on the street just because they look Asian and are being told that they don't belong here, or spreading the virus. And again, the underlying false ideas we see underneath this are these xenophobic ideas that Asian Americans don't belong here, that they're a faceless group of people, that one Asian American person represents the whole group, and that they're spreading disease. So that's kind of what we're up against here, right? It's ugly stuff, but that's what we're up against. So we want to develop tools for fighting this stuff. So before I continue, I just want to make sure, again, we're not in the same room. So I literally want you to just put in the chat if we're good to go. If you're like, I'm on board with everything, or I understand everything that I've learned so far, and we're ready to proceed, please put yes, or just put good to go in the chat right now. I want to see it. Put a yes or good to go. Or even better, if you have a question or something you want to discuss before we continue, please put that in the chat. So again, please put in the chat either yes, because you're good to go, or right, good to go, or put a question in the chat. Okay, I see some yeses. Seeing some good to goes. Again, you can use the chat or the Q&A function.
Yeah, I think the members of the public only have access to the Q&A feature.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I'm seeing that now. So let me clarify now that I'm realizing that. Members of the public, I'm seeing you put in the Q&A that you're good to go. Please put those in. And if you have questions, let me know. Again, I wish I could be in the same room and see you, but this is just my way of making sure that I'm addressing any questions or thoughts that come up during the flow of the presentation. Seeing a lot of good to goes. Okay, Brandon and Matt will be keeping an eye on the Q&A to let me know if any questions come up that I haven't seen so far.
I do see one person has their hand up.
Please.
It looks like board member Ann Seligman. Ann, do you have a question?
Sorry, no, that was totally, I clicked the wrong thing.
Oh, all good. All right. Thanks, Ann.
Sorry.
Nope, no problem at all, Ann. Okay, folks, so we're going to continue. I'm seeing all these good to goes come in. That is great. And again, please put in a question if you have it. So against these four types of oppression, ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized, we also can think about four types of power. So the first is the most commonly thought of type of power, which is coercive power. The power to force something to do something they don't want to do because it's for your own benefit, because you want to, exploiting someone, subjugating someone in some kind of way. That's power over. But there's other kinds of power that we can tap into. Power with is part of what we're all tapping into tonight. Cooperative power, looking out for each other, banding together to effectualize our values in the world. Power to is power to get done and create the society that we want to create, right? So we have a vision of a society where, New York is the greatest diasporic experiment in human history. We have 100 languages and 100 religions and 100 walks of life. And that's what makes our city great. But it takes a lot of work, right, to actually be great. We have to have the skills and attitude and power to look after one another to make it great. And finally, power within, that's an individual self-knowledge of saying, yeah, I have skills, I know myself, I know my limits, I know my strengths, maybe I know where I come from. Could be a cultural or ethnic heritage or a religious one, or a more individual one or familial one, but saying, yeah, I'm ready for this. Okay, so thinking about when a scenario situation pops off in the street, we see a variety of potential barriers to intervening. I know I felt all of these at different times. So one thing is when you see something on a subway platform, it looks heated, it looks ugly, you don't like what you see, but you say to yourself, I'm not sure if I intervene, am I going to start getting shoved? Am I going to start having slurs directed at me? Or in that same situation, you might say to yourself, well, that looks like a messed up situation. I want to do something, but maybe I'll make it worse. Or maybe I just don't know what to do at all. I mean, what do I say? This person is acting so cruelly, so abusively. What could I possibly do to change it? And finally, another common one we see is fear of exposure, because we live in the era of the smartphone. A lot of things get recorded, right? So, first of all, the person being victimized didn't leave their house that day and think, oh yeah, I'm going to get, harassed because of my identity. Like, no one should live that way. And it's also true that people who are intervening don't leave their house that morning saying, I'm going to, intervene in a situation, and it's going to be recorded on a video, and the video might go viral, and whatever I do will be evaluated by 1 million people. That's, a reasonable fear. We live in that age, and so we have to make decisions in response to those barriers. I'm curious if anyone else has other barriers that have come up for them. Please put them in the Q&A, like things where you're like, yeah, I remember this situation, and here's why I didn't want to act, or here's why I hesitated before acting, or even just thinking hypothetically. I'd love to see them in the Q&A. And before we develop some concrete skills, I want to share a couple of personal experiences, anecdotes of times that I have intervened. One of these stories is from before I learned bystander intervention techniques, and the others after. I think it'll be pretty obvious which is which, but I won't, spoil it nonetheless. And as you're listening, I want you to just listen with an open mind of, here's what I might do similarly, and here's what I might do differently. Or here's what Jonah, did that was effective, or here's what Jonah could have done differently. And I want you to keep that open mind through it. As we then continue through learning some concrete specific skills. And you can say, oh, which ones did Jonah use? Which ones could he have used that he didn't and might have been worthwhile? And again, this is with the spirit of saying there's no one right way to do it. There's no one size fit all. It really depends on the context, who you are, and what the situations that you see. So the first story, these were both pre-COVID, by the way. So the first story, I was on West 14th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue, walking with a friend, a woman, to the 1 train on 14th Street. And as we were walking up the block, we saw, it was really crowded time in 14th Street, but we saw kind of like the crowd kind of funneling out a little bit because there was a disturbance of some kind. As we got closer, we saw that it was a woman walking up towards us, walking east. We were walking west, walking east up the block, and behind her was a man who was kind of pulling on her and then saying, "Come here," and then letting her go. And she kept getting a few paces away from him, and she said, "Let go of me, let go of me, let me go, get out of here, let me go." She was calling him by his name, so obviously they knew each other. We got closer and closer, and this just was repeating. I heard her say half dozen times, "Get out of here, let me go, let me go." And he's kind of pulling at her and following her and letting her go, and then following her and pulling at her. So and no one was doing anything. So I felt really bothered by this. It felt really wrong. So I walked closer to them. I approached them. We were approaching each other. I approached them and said, "Hey, let go of her." She said, "Let her go. Let go of her." She said, "Let her go." And he ignored me. And they just kept doing this. She's saying, "Let go of me," to him. He's kind of pulling, "Come here, come here." And then I start to follow them. And my friend starts to follow after me. And I'm just repeating like this, "Hey, let go of her. Let go of her. She said, let her go." Really loud. No one else on the street is doing anything. Finally, he turns at me and says, "F off." But I keep following and saying this. And then a few times later, he turns around, stops for a minute, and looks at me and says, "F off, or I'm going to come after you." I didn't stop. Once he started following her again, I started following him, and I resumed it. And he turned around, ran up at me, threw a punch at me. Luckily, I was able to dodge it in the moment. And then he ran back after her. She got him like 50 feet ahead, but he caught up with her, and they just resumed this. At that point, I stopped following them. I stopped saying anything. I didn't know what to do. My friend with me was really scared and shaken by what had happened. We hadn't discussed what to do beforehand. I just went ahead with it. And we were both very disturbed by it, and I don't know what happened to that woman. So that's the first story. The second story is coming down the Upper West Side on the A train. I had gotten in a seat. It was a weekday on the way to work. I got in a seat, and I was sitting and reading my prayer book, which I sometimes do or used to do on those daily commute mornings. And I noticed I don't know, from just kind of above, just at the periphery of my top of my vision, or maybe first thing was I heard this guy talking, and he was talking to someone in front of him, talking to someone in front of him, but they weren't responding at all. That's odd. So maybe I started to look up a little, and there was a man holding that kind of strap hanger bar immediately across from me, and he was hovering over a woman, and he was talking to her, and she just wasn't responding. And I thought, "Oh, that seems like something's off there." But I'm tired. I'm on bleary-eyed. What got my way to the commute? I'm also reading my prayer book right now. Like I don't want to deal with this right now. And then I thought to myself, this is why I pray, is to be ready for these moments when there's something I don't want to do but should. So put my prayer book down. I looked up. I just started watching the situation across from me. And the situation was just repeating as it had been. He was talking to her. She was not really making eye contact with him. She was just kind of shifting uncomfortably in her seat as he hovered over her. And then about after a half minute or a minute, she saw me looking, and she just gave me a look like this. She just widened her eyes for a moment at me. And again, I said to myself, I don't know what she's trying to say. What does that look mean? But in my gut, I was like, she just gave me a look to say, yes, I see you looking, and I need help here. So I stood up. I walked over to the guy, and I said to him, "Hey," and he turned around. And I said, "Do you know how to get to Coney Island?" And he said, what? And I said, does this train go to Coney Island? He said, no, you have to switch to the F. And I said, oh, the F, that's the Uptown F? And he said, no, it's the Brooklyn F. I said, oh, what station is that? He started telling me, and I said, so do you like Coney Island? Do people say it's good? Should I go there? He said, well, I like the boardwalk. And, I carried this conversation on with him for as long as I could manage, which was, probably not for more than a minute. But somehow, by the time the conversation was done, the spell had been broken. And he was done more or less talking to her, and he got off at the next stop. And she looked up at me and she said, thank you. And I said, are you okay? And she said, I'm okay. I said, all right. And then she said, are you reading the Bible over there? And I said, well, no, it's a Jewish prayer book. And then we ended up having a conversation about her Christian practice and my Jewish one. And we wrote a few more stops together, and then she got off to go to work. And that was the end of the interaction. So again, as I think it's pretty obvious again, which one I had training before and which one I hadn't been. But just think for yourself, what would I do similarly? What would I do differently? What did Jonah do well? What could Jonah have done differently as we learned some skills? I just want to, before we continue, I see there's a Q&A. There's a question, what should you do if you're attacked in the subway? So that's a really good question. We're going to look at some specific skills for how to help other people, right? So this isn't a self-defense class. This is actually a bystander intervention training. So we're going to be looking at, if you see someone else getting attacked on the subway, what could you do? And if you're interested in self-defense classes, I really recommend the Center for Anti-Violence Education, who's our partner on this training. You can Google them, find their website easily, and they offer great self-defense classes. Okay, so how do you get ready when something pops off? So it might be counterintuitive, but one of the best things you can do is take a moment to just take a couple of deep breaths. So let's all just do it again right now. Everyone exhale. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. Take another deep breath in and out on your own count. And that's just that little bit, that 10, 15 seconds of grounding we can do in that situation to get ourselves in a calm and alert state so that we can make the best decision for ourselves and whoever's being attacked. So once we're grounded, we can be aware of what our own triggers are, right? So people have different things that set them off, and they have different ways that they react. So for me as a white man, I know that, conflicts between men can pop off really quickly in public, right? When something just starts, it can actually escalate really quickly. And so if I see like a man acting out, my first reaction is actually usually anger. For someone else, because of their, just who they are individually, or because they have different social experiences, then first reaction might be fear, or sadness, or dissociating, or shrinking, or, lunging forward. So just knowing that about yourself, so that you can be self-aware and regulate yourself in the moment and say, okay, this is how I'm reacting. But like for me, I can't lead with my anger. If I lead with my anger, that's not going to diffuse a situation, right? So knowing that's about myself and being able to self-soothe myself and not go into a situation until I can be calm. And it's going to look like different things for different people. That's just my example for me. So let's talk about position. So that means reading the room. As New Yorkers, we might just be a little more attuned than a lot of people to just being aware of what's going on around us. But when something seems to be popping off, we want to say, okay, what are the ways if I need to leave or someone else needs to leave? Where are they? Is there a stairway there? How close am I to the nearest subway door? Is there a bodega that I could pop into right there if I'm on the street? Whatever it might be. Want to see who's around us, not just for the sake of reading threats, but actually understanding each other as potential allies. We can cooperatively help solve situations like this together. So who can help out, or who seems like they might be adding on and escalating or worsening the situation or initiating a threat. We want to keep our hands loose and open in front of us, by our sides. We want to convey confident body language. So again, we don't want to be slumped over in defeat. Neither do we want to be hyped up and macho, just that calm, alert, and ready posture. We don't want our hands in fists. They might be in fists because we're human beings. We might see a dangerous situation or situation that just is upsetting to us. We might cross our arms, we might put our hands in fists. So having that self-awareness, taking that couple of deep breaths, finding yourself in a nice, easy, loose, calm, but alert posture that conveys confidence. One other thing is, if we decide to approach the person who is doing the attack, we don't want to just walk up straight onto them like this. When we approach them, we want to approach them at a slight angle, say 30 or 45-degree angle. Why do we do that? Because if we have one foot slightly in front and one foot slightly in back, we're actually at a more stable position if they initiate any kind of aggression towards us, and it's less threatening. So I don't want to come forward like this. I want to just approach them like this, a little bit turned, a little bit stable, more stable and safe. And again, I've been saying this in different ways, but who we are, our individual experience, but also our identities can make a really big difference in deciding how we want to intervene in a situation. Again, for instance, like, I know that as a white man, I've generally been treated with a lot of respect by police, and police generally don't threaten me. So if there's a policeman on the scene or something like that, that's not something that I feel like I need to worry about. That might be different for a Black man or another person of color. Someone who is undocumented might be in a really different position of saying, I don't know how involved I can get in a particular situation if police are involved, or if someone has their cameras out and they're filming something. An undocumented person might decide, yes, I want to intervene, or they might say, no, I just can't be high profile right now because I risk deportation. Just have to decide, for us in that situation, what are we able to do? So before we continue any further, just want to do that again, that check-in, because we're not in the same room. Please put in the Q&A or the chat. Tell me if yes, type a yes, or type good to go if we're good to go. Or even better, if you have questions or comments about this material that we just covered, please put it in. So I'm seeing some yeses, good to go. Some more good to goes. Some yeses. Okay, great. I'm going to proceed. But again, if a question comes up, Matt or Brandon will alert me. Okay, so what are some tools for intervening? 4 Ds. These are adapted from an organization called the Hollaback Collective. So the first D is direct intervention. We want to respond. We can choose to rather respond directly to the aggressor. So a very dramatic example of this, and a real life one, is, or based on a real life one, Asian woman was being pushed onto subway tracks. So a group of people saw this act of anti-Asian violence, and the stakes were really high, right? It could be, God forbid, her life. So they directly intervened by collecting as a group of people and physically restraining the person who was attacking this woman. Again, I want to emphasize that this was a really high stakes situation. That was life or death. That's why they decided for a direct intervention that was physical. And they did it as a group of people so that they could do it as safely as possible for themselves. There can be much lower stakes examples. You can walk up to someone and just say like, hey, why are you talking to her that way? That's that's disrespectful. Are you, like, talk to me. What's going on here? I want to know what's going on. That could be a direct intervention. We can also delegate. So that might be looking around us and saying, okay, I'm about to walk up to this person and use one of these tactics, but before I do it, I'm going to point to the person next to me and say, hey, get your smartphone out and record this. Or I might see, oh, wait, there's two other people next, close to me who are watching closely with a lot of concern. And look at them and say, hey, let's go talk to this person together. Let's go talk to the attacker. Let's go talk to them together. This is messed up. Come on, let's talk to them. Could be appealing to a whole subway car and saying, hey, look at what's happening here. We don't allow this kind of thing. We look out for each other. Look at this. Just getting people involved, building allies there. It could be that you don't want to directly intervene. I trained a group of grandmothers last year, and some of them said, I'm more afraid physically. I could really, God forbid, get hurt if I approach someone, a big guy, let's say, who's doing something. What can I do? And I said, in Jewish, we say, like grandmothers would call them bubbies. So I said, well, what you've got is bubby power, right? You've got the power as a grandmother, that moral authority to look at someone on the street and say, are you going to let that happen? Is this okay? Right? You can get other people involved and say, come on, you need to step up. On this block, this is going to happen. You can also look for professionals who are around, bus drivers, people working in the stores, policemen, whatever it might be. Third D is distract. So this one you've heard a little bit about already, but you can get really creative with this one. You can, there have been examples where someone was harassing a Muslim woman wearing a hijab on the subway. And a guy interrupted the whole situation by just walking really, 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 really close up to the guy who was doing the harassing and starting to read passages from a fiction book on a crowded subway car really loudly. And it was just so weird that it kind of burst the bubble of the situation. You can make things up. I have found that, a lot of people who are attackers also really love giving directions. There's, like if you ask them for how to get somewhere, you get really involved with that. They're willing often to be distracted by that. You could get really creative. You're on the street and there aren't too many people around, but someone's harassing someone else. So you could be like, oh my God, there's a fire. There's a fire right around the corner. Do you hear it? There's a fire, or something like that. You could just make something up. You could walk over to the person being attacked and pretend to know them. This is a tactic that I've heard a lot of people use. So you can walk up to someone and say, Shirley, it's been so long. How are you? How's the new job? And if someone's really being attacked like that, more often than not, people's experiences, if you make something up like that, they're going to pick up the cue that you're trying to help them, and they'll make something up with you too. And again, that can just help burst the bubble and say, oh, this person has friends right here. In that situation, you can ignore the attacker, pretend that it's not happening. You might not want to do that if they're super escalated, right? If they're looking physically violent, then you don't want to become part of the group that they're attacking. You want other people to come help if you're going to intervene in that kind of situation, or you just want to distract the attacker away. The last D is document, and it's a tricky one. It's a really, really tricky one. It's a powerful tool. We've seen it as a powerful tool of social change, right? If we think about the George Floyd protests that happened 2 years ago, well, in part, those were only possible because that marginalized group can be a very powerful tool for change. On the other hand, it can be very invasive of someone's privacy, right? Going back to what I said earlier, no one leaves the house, or no one should leave the house, let me say, thinking, am I going to be attacked today? Right? Unfortunately, we have a reality that some people have to live that way because there are attacks on their group or on them. right? But no one should have to think that way. And no one should have to think, oh my God, I'm going to be recorded, attacking right now. Oh, I'm seeing a note that I froze up on the video a little bit a moment ago. So just to say again, this is a really powerful tool for social change, right? The George Floyd protests were possible because in part because the horrible killing of George Floyd was recorded on a smartphone. And people who are outside of that marginalized group, in this case, outside of the group of Black people, started to realize like, oh, this kind of thing happens to Black people. It really raised awareness. But again, there's this other piece that's very invasive of privacy. So how do we balance those things? The bottom line is, it is fine to document. It is only okay to share that documentation with anyone if you have the permission of the person who is being attacked. And that means you got to stick around and ask for it. If they don't give you that permission, then you don't share it. And that can be really counterintuitive, right? We want to spread a story to show what's happening. But again, we don't want to add to that person's, to the disrespect and violence against that person by having their face all over the internet if that's not what they've consented to. We need to make sure that they want it to be shared, and we need to know who they want it shared with. Some people want to share with the police. Some people won't want it shared with the police. Those are both valid choices. We respect that. Some people might want it on social people, some won't. Some will say, just send it to me. Some will say, just erase it. Got to respect that. Okay, we're going to do some more concrete tools in a moment. But again, I'm going to pause right now. I'd love to hear from you in the Q&A. Just, from what we've learned so far, what are some tools that appeal to you more? And which ones would you be more hesitant to do? Or if you want to put in the Q&A, any examples of like, oh yeah, here's a time that I saw this being done, or here's a time I did it myself, or here's another version of distract that you could do, or here's another version of delegate that you could do. So I'd love to see that stuff in the Q&A. Please let me know what you're thinking. So I hear from RuPaul, and I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name, that asking for directions is a good idea that they wouldn't have thought of. Yep, right. That's the kind of thing, like I never would have thought of that until someone taught me to think of that kind of thing. Anne loves distraction and adds like taking a deep breath is key because it's really easy to respond with anger. And also adds that one time when she responded with anger, it worked because the guy was drunk and it was 8 a.m. and went Big Bear. So this actually is a technique that can work, and sometimes is like being like really stern, repetitive, simple, and authoritative. And I've specifically seen it work with people who are inebriated. It's just, it's like, how do you get through that haze, and just giving them really, really clear, direct directions. Okay, these are great. Please keep them coming in. I'd love to hear things that appeal to you, things that you're more hesitant about, or things that you have tried. And last but not least, whatever you do, and it's really valid to not do any of these. In some situations, you might not know what to do, or you might decide, this isn't safe for me to intervene. It's not the time. I can't do this one. No matter what, we can stick around, watch, and wait for the situation to resolve in some kind of way, and then check in with the person afterwards. And this is really key. It's simple, but it's key. I'm going to say it in a couple ways. One is that I have heard from people who experienced hate violence in the street and no one intervened and no one talked to them afterwards, that on top of the horrible experience of being discriminated or attacked on the street just because of who they are, they started to feel like maybe everyone else was thinking the same thing about me. Maybe they thought this is what someone like me, how someone like me should be treated. And that's a horrible thing, right? Because that's an added layer of injustice that's going to affect how that person moves through the world, and how the people they know who share that identity move through the world. They're going to say, is everyone thinking this is how I should be treated? I should be treated with violence, that I'm dangerous or unwanted. That's really horrible. And a basic thing that you can deliver by checking in is just saying, hey, that was messed up. Are you okay? Sorry that happened. You know, just having that human connection. Because the fact of the matter is, the vast majority of us really do care about one another and think we should have a New York that thrives on its diversity, that treasures its diversity, and where neighbors look out for one another. But if people aren't intervening, it's often more because they think, oh, someone else will do it, or, you know, I don't know how to, or I'm afraid to, or, you know, lots of valid reasons. But those can come across to someone as saying, oh, they didn't care about me. So at a minimum, just checking in with someone afterwards can make a big difference. So let's talk specifically about de-escalation. De-escalation means someone has escalated. They're aggressive, their adrenaline's pumping, they're angry, they're shouting, they're acting out, they're trying to make a situation more and more tense. We want to get them calmer and calmer. We want to get them to a place where they can make a better decision. Okay. So there's a whole set of tools here. And again, it's a menu of options. Depends on the context and on what fits you, what you feel like you could really own. So first of all, get to we. So I'm going to walk up to if I'm going to walk up to someone who's attacking someone else, rather than saying, hey, you need to stop that. That's messed up. What's wrong with you? I might walk up and say, hey, let's talk. What's going on here? We can figure this out together. Something's bothering you. Let's talk about it together. We can work on this. I want to know. Tell me. And it may make them feel a little bit like there's a sympathetic ear, and that can help them calm down a little bit. Want to offer some alternatives. You know, people respond well to options, even very simple ones, rather than being told what to do. So rather than saying, hey, lay off of her, I could walk up to someone and say, hey, you can keep talking to her, or you can talk to me, because I want to listen. Let's talk. I want to know what's going on. So you can keep talking to her, or you can talk to me. Do you want to talk to me? Another trick, counterintuitive, is match and lead. So psychologists have found that when someone is very escalated, they actually listen much better to someone who initially displays a similar level of escalation. So if someone's shouting and being nasty and escalated at someone else, you walk up to them and you say, hey, can we talk? It actually just might not neurologically register for them. If you walk up to them and you say, hey, and then they turn around, they're neurologically, their levels match with you, they're neurologically more likely to respond. And then something very funny can happen, which is once they're locked into you, if you gradually step it down, they may subconsciously start stepping it down too, because humans are social creatures. So this is something psychologists have found, and I've seen it work. So, hey, what's going on? Let's talk. Come on, I want to talk to you. Let's talk. What's going on? What's bothering you? Just step them down. You can use the broken record technique. That's something that Anne was referring to. And as I said, it can be, I've seen it be successful, and sounds like Anne has, with inebriated people who are just kind of like acting badly and with just like poor decision making, just to break through and say, stop that, lay off, talk to me, put that down, and just like almost, extremely basic, loud, clear, simple, so it can penetrate through the haze. I've seen that work with like two drunk people just kind of like slowly fighting each other in the street, and they're kind of fighting and it could go wrong, but they're also just like too drunk to really know what they're doing. I saw someone break up a fight like that, like, break it up, and literally, just like a teacher in a schoolyard, but that's what worked with someone who was that inebriated. So the next one is losing to win. Picking your battles means you're not going to be able to intervene in every situation. And that could be because you feel like it would make you unsafe based on who you are. It might be, I'm just too angry right now and I'm going to escalate it. It might be, I just don't know what to do. Or, it might be, I need a professional here. And this is a situation that needs a professional. I can't handle it. In all those situations, it's legitimate to say, make that choice. Ideally, I'd like you to walk away from our training able to make that choice, or more and more able to make that choice, saying, yep, I am going to intervene. What's my menu of options? I'm getting grounded. I'm aware of how I'm feeling. Or saying, I can't do it this time. And that can be hard because what's happening is horrible. And, if you're a sensitive and caring person and I just, you probably are, if you're attending this training with the, you're here because you want to look out for other people, it can be hard to see someone getting bullied and not being able to intervene, or intervening and it doesn't work. I'm not out here trying to claim that my success rate is at like 90%. A lot of times I try things that don't work. A lot of times I try them and they do. And sometimes I'm like, I can't handle this right now for X, Y, or Z reason. Last couple ones here, I statements. So again, rather than being accusatory and being like, you're messed up, that's, that's horrible. You can just say like, that's bothering me. Just, like, I don't like this. I don't like how you're talking to him, and then, okay, like, person you're talking to is not going to like that, but it's less escalating than saying like, that's wrong, that's messed up. And finally, naming the behavior. So rather than saying, if you do want to address what the behavior is, do so and don't talk about the person themselves. The less accusatory you are, even if they have it coming to them, because that's what they're showing, less accusatory are, the more chance they have to be a little open to changing what they're doing, maybe meaningfully so, and it might change. So rather than being like, you're racist, what's wrong with you? Being like, if you want to say like, that's messed up. I might not even say, even if something was racist, I might not even say, that was racist, what you said to her. I might not say that. Even if it wasn't. Why? Because my priority in that situation is looking out for the person being attacked. Right? I'm not in a larger moment of political, education for someone about how racism works and how they need to learn how to be decent towards other people. I'm not actually trying to redeem the person attacking them right now. I'm trying to look out for the person being attacked. And my best chance to do that is by approaching them in a way, if I choose to approach them, that makes them less defensive and gets their attention away from the person they're attacking and de-escalates them to make a better choice. Okay, folks. So again, I'm going to ask you, please put in the Q&A, which of these do you feel like might be a good fit for you? Which do you think would not be a good fit for you? Which have you seen before? Which have you never seen before? Which have you done? Any reflections like that, please put them down in the Q&A. And while folks are working on that, I'm going to be reading through a Q&A comment that someone gave a little bit earlier. Yeah, so someone shared an anecdote about seeing a young woman, a mom who kept hitting her young son on the subway. And so she approached closer and just like started watching, didn't say anything, made sure that it wasn't like serious, like lasting bad physical harm, and just watched closely. And then after a while, the child said, or rather the woman's partner said, there are people looking at us, and she stopped doing it. So yeah, even just giving your attention to something can change the situation. And for me, you know, in that situation, that might be a one where I might try distraction. I don't want to shame a mom, even if she's doing something shameful, because she might actually, if she feels ashamed and then goes home, she might take it out on the kid. So I might just try and go do something distraction, and if it's a subway, ask for directions or something like that. Super counterintuitive, but it can break the spell. Or even just walking up very closely and like reading your book or singing a song out loud. Doing weird things can just burst the bubble. Here, Anne embracing her bubbyhood. Very good. Hoping never to use these skills. I hope you don't have to either, but Anne, I have a feeling you'll be prepared if God forbid it comes up. Anne asked in the situation that I just read out loud, could you ask the mom whether she's having a bad day and if there's something you can do? You know, I don't know. I think it kind of might work for a bubby. For me, I think if I went and did that, she'd be like, F off. You know, I'm angry already. Don't get involved in my situation. That's condescending. Maybe from a grandmother, it could work. But again, I would just try to be a little more indirect, because I could see someone being defensive in that situation. Are you having a bad day? Why are you asking me if I'm having a bad day? So thinking about something a little bit more indirect, like asking her for help, that could change her mindset a lot, right? Could get really creative. So you're a grandmother and say, oh man, I'm so hungry. I forgot to eat lunch today. I'm feeling faint. Do you know where's a good place to go eat? Something like that. In this neighborhood, where should I get off? That might move her into a different mindset that's less punitive and violent. RuPaul asked, in that first situation where you followed the guy and he tried to punch me, so this is that anecdote that I shared, what would I have done differently? A lot. So actually, let me put that all out to you all just to think for a moment before I answer. So in that situation on West 14th Street, where I saw a man chasing or harassing a woman that he knew, as we're walking to the 1 train, what do you think I should have done differently? So you can just think about it, or you can put in the chat. I'm just going to sit with that for a minute, and then I'll share, you know, my own reflections on it. Okay, so I'm going to share some of what I would have done differently in that situation. First things first, I needed to ground myself. I had an immediate anger reaction, and this kind of like male protective thing, like I can't let another guy beat this woman up, you know, or hurt this woman. And that's fine. I can have that reaction, but I can't lead with the anger. So taking a few deep breaths. Next thing I wish I had done is I wish I had talked to the woman I was with to say, I'm thinking of talking to him. I'm thinking of saying something. Is that okay with you? Or what should we do? Is it okay if I go intervene? Do you want to intervene? Do you want to do this together? And that can be really counterintuitive when something's popping off, but taking the time to do that. So that, you know, because in that case, it was a young woman watching a case of domestic violence on the street. Like that was horrible for her too, as a woman. So, you know, part of what I can do in that situation, there's limits to what I can control, but at least I can, you know, enact saying, oh, what do you want? And we're going to be responsive to that. You know, that's one of the ways we want to be towards each other. And that's not how domestic violence works. So that would be something I'd do differently. And I think it's a situation where I would have delegated. You know, there's so many people around us. So looking for someone to bring in, you know, or looking for someone to record it, getting a few if I decided I'm going to directly intervene, getting a few other people on the streets to approach the person together. And the last thing I'll say about it is I think domestic violence situations are some of the hardest, because this is not, almost certainly not the only time that it has happened or will happen again. And even when police get involved, these situations often repeat again and again. So one of the things I regret about that situation is I think I shamed the guy and escalated him. But I have to live with this, but it's a horrible thing. Like, shaming and escalating him, who is he likely to take that out on? You know, so there's a responsibility in intervening in these situations too. And I frankly regret the way that I did. I understand why I did, but it was important for me to get trained so that I could do it differently in the future. Yeah, and Brendan says, like, perhaps distracting would have been better. Making a scene. Oh my God, there's a fire. I don't know what it would be. What would get someone that escalated chasing after, you know, his doing intimate partner violence? Okay, let's do, this is serious stuff, folks. I just want to acknowledge again that this is really serious. You know, it matters a lot and it's hard, and we can make a really big difference. You know, so I don't want to minimize what's at stake. And I also want to say, like, it's really amazing that y'all are here, and getting trained up like this can really make a difference. And it has for me and many others. Okay, folks, let's take a minute to look at one of our scenarios. We're just gonna do one for the sake of time. And I'm actually gonna ask, can anyone on our committee volunteer to read this out loud for us, just so we can have a different voice?
I think Lou is speaking, but Lou, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I can't hear Lou. So Matt, do you want to read out loud?
Sure, I'll read it. This scenario, a Black lesbian couple walking down the sidewalk holding hands. They come across a group of men. The men begin to taunt them, call them slurs, and say things that are graphic in nature, make lewd gestures relating to their genitals. The couple does not engage with them, but picks up their pace. They thankfully find themselves in front of a bodega and a pizzeria with people hanging outside.
Okay, so this is the situation that happens. These women are getting harassed by a group of men. So what basically, if you were in that as an onlooker in that situation, you're outside the bodega and pizzeria eating a slice of pizza. What could you do? What could you do to help these people in this situation? What could you do? So I'd love to take a moment to think about it, and then put your answers in the Q&A. What could you do in this situation to look out for this couple that's getting harassed? So I hear from Melissa, pretend I know them and ask them to join my group, right? So I'm eating with a group of friends or got snacks with a group of friends. It's like, oh, you know, and make up a name. You know, Vanessa, Sarah, come over here, right? Or Shanita says, get a few people to call out, hey, Sheila and Tanya, how are you? With you, right? So you could like, you see it going, you take your moment, take your deep breaths, go over your strategy, say, I'm not gonna just react right away. I'm talking to a couple of my potential allies over here, getting other people involved who are outside the pizzeria. And Thompson adds, I would ask them if they knew another pizza place in the area, right? Just walk up to, could you walk up to the women, or you could walk up to the men harassing them and say, I don't like the pizza at this place. Is there a better place? What about, where do I get a grandma slice in the neighborhood? I'm thinking of getting delivery, just like throw in some chaos into the situation. Create enough of a distraction so that maybe you buy them some time to walk into the bodega. These are all really great. You could also ask someone to document it, right? Someone who's outside. You could call them in and say, oh, hey, come on into the, your slices are ready. Something like that. Or, Phil is asking for you. Yeah, Phil, go on in. They have a pretty good chance they're going to pick up on what's happening and be able to go with it. A direct approach might not be as effective here because we have like a group of men. So if it's a group of people, numbers are kind of against you, might be less likely to intervene directly. But these distraction, delegate, document, those are all good strategies in this situation. And Virginia asks, any suggestions for getting other bystanders involved along with you? Yeah, I just really, great question. I think it depends on who you are and what your personality is. So let me also put it to the group right now. Like, what might you do? Like let's get really granular. There's a half dozen people eating pizza outside this pizzeria with you. One or two of them. You don't know the rest. You want to get them to help you say, Shanita's suggestion, like, hey, Tanya and so, come on in, so good to see you. How do you actually get granular? What are you actually going to say to those fellow onlookers to get them to do that? So if you have any ideas, put them in the chat, or if you want to just think about it, because it's really going to depend person to person. Right. So if you're a grandmother, maybe you could use that Bubby power I was talking about and say, like, we're not going to let him, we can't let him do something like this. Are you going to let him do something like this? I want you to call out to them, pretend you know them. Come on. Be kind of, for me, I might just do something really simple and be like, do you see what's happening there? And then just give them a moment to watch and to acknowledge, yes, I do see what's happening there. And say to them something like empowering, like, we can do something about that, right? And now you all know that you can do something about it. So we can do something about that. Let's all pretend, follow my lead. Let's all pretend we know them so they come over and feel safe with us. Hey, Tanya and Vanessa, whatever it might be, and get people involved like that. And says, hey, this is messed up. Let's help these ladies out. Right? Maybe it's a group of guys. Maybe there's a group of guys there and you're like, are you going to let these ladies get treated like this on the street? Appeal to their male protectiveness if you think that's helpful in that situation. Great questions. So I'm going to answer one or two more questions that have come up, and then I'm going to bring us to our conclusion because I want to respect everyone's time this evening. So there was a question about, are there additional tips if the person committing the harm is or seems to be mentally ill? That's a great question. So first of all, I just want to talk about occurrences. Being mentally ill has no correlation with being an attacker in this kind of situation. There are other things like people who have committed domestic violence are way more likely to commit street harassment or street violence against a stranger than someone else. But mental illness actually has zero prediction one way or the other, or mental health about someone being an attacker. That being said, people who are, out of touch with reality are part of our society, and just like any, so they may be an attacker sometimes, just like someone who is in touch with reality may be. In that case, do not make things up. Do not pretend things, right? Do not invent things like, oh, I don't know what it would be like. Oh no, this isn't a subway. This is, I'm kind of, I'm struggling to come up with something like, or your mother is calling. It's like you wouldn't use that as a distraction technique. Your mom's on the phone. She wants to talk to you, but she needs to talk outside the subway car. You would never try that on a person who doesn't seem mentally ill because they would laugh you off. Don't try that on someone who's mentally ill. Just keep it really simple and straightforward. Be like, I don't like how you're talking to this person. Are you upset? Do you want to talk with me? Something like that. Okay. After, if or when an attack happens, something goes down or harassment happens, take care of yourself. If you need a cup of tea when you get home, if you need to do yoga or meditate or call a friend, if you need to cry about it, if you need to punch your pillow about it, allow those feelings to arise, express them, care for them. These are hard situations. They're the worst for the person being attacked, but they also affect all of us. You can use your breath. And in the long run, you can say, what can I do in my community about this? What policies can I change? How can I participate on a community board level or in local, whatever it might be, to make sure that men aren't harassing women on the street here, or that Asian Americans are being treated equally, or Black people are being treated fairly by the police and so forth. So again, I just want you to walk away with a sense that this is a start. This isn't telling you what to do. It's getting you to think for yourself. What might I do in these different situations? How can I recognize my own position in a situation, my own feelings, and regulate and ground myself enough to make a conscious and effective choice that's calm and alert? Forgiving ourselves, when we don't intervene or when we fail to intervene successfully, because ultimately the person who's doing the attack is the person who's making that choice and is responsible for it, and we are not. We're just responsible for making the best choice we can in that moment, whether it's to intervene or not intervene, whether it's to use one tool or another. And to understand this doesn't come from nowhere. It comes because there's these deep inequalities in our society and these deep held beliefs about certain groups that are dehumanizing, that are violent, and that affect all of us in one way or another, but it can be in very different ways. And last but not least, we're New Yorkers. We look out for each other. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. We have that power. This is, I think, the greatest city on the face of the earth. And it is that way because we come from a million walks of life. And it takes work to make that best version of the city possible, where everyone gets to be themselves. So everyone just, kind of take a deep exhale out. Inhale slowly in. And kind of just a deep exhale out. You can stamp your feet or shake your hands out a little. Just kind of letting go of the serious material. I want you to know that going forward, you can always contact the New York City Commission on Human Rights. If you hear of an incident of discrimination that happened in New York City, you can call 311 and ask for us, or there's this phone number here. You can also look at our website, which is listed here, or contact the Center of Anti-Violence Education New York, upstander@cny.org. If you want to contact them about upstander trainings or self-defense trainings, or just learn more about their work or volunteer, etc. So with that, folks, I'm gonna close off here. I'm gonna hang on the call for a few more minutes and watch for the Q&A to see if anything comes up that I can answer by typing. But I'm going to finish my presentation here and just be listening on for a few minutes and watching the chat unless there are any final questions, in case there are any final questions. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Jonah. Really appreciate it. A lot of great information. I know we've been getting some great feedback in the Q&A. I'm just going to open it up to the committee real quick to see if there's any other closing thoughts on this. Anybody has any comments, questions, or if there's any other topics that you'd want to explore further?
I just wanted to say I've sat in on this training before, and and now it's my second time, and like each time it's like just so useful and just so full of information that's practical and I can incorporate into my kind of behavior pretty easily. So I really appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Seema, and thank you for bringing this to our attention. Seema is actually one of the people behind this. That allowed us to get it scheduled tonight. So thanks again, Seema. Anyone else? Okay. So again, so I know we still have some members of the public. So if you guys have any questions, you can always email the community board office with any feedback. If there's any other presentations you'd like to hear in future months, I know Jonah, you have some other topics, other presentations that we could also offer. I think this is a pretty good success, and maybe we'll try to do another one in the spring sometime.
That sounds good. Thank you. Thank you all so much for having me. Really, really
Thank
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Have a good
likewise. You too. Talk again soon.
Okay, sounds good. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. All right. So that brings us in the agenda to the chair's report. I don't have a whole lot. So I mentioned at the top that we have nothing on the agenda for next month. So that means as of right now, we will not have a meeting. But if anybody has any topics or any other items to come up, we may change that. Same will go for December. On a Thursday night in December, I try to give everybody the month off, just because low participation across the board throughout the holiday season. So if there's nothing urgent, we will probably not meet until January. That being said, I don't know if it's public knowledge yet, but I believe there is a forum happening with the mayor on Tuesday. So if I hear any more information, I will get that out to everybody. I have some information on it, but I don't know if it's public, and I don't know if I'm supposed to attend just yet. But keep your eyes open for that. We'll get to the info. I know it's last minute. I just came there last night, so more to come there. That brings us to old or new business. It's 8 o'clock already. Does anyone have any old or new items of old or new business? Please raise your hands. Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to
So
adjourn.
moved.
All right, very good. If there's no objections, we will adjourn the meeting exactly at 8 o'clock. And thank you all for your participation, and forward to catching up with everybody soon.